I'm Tamara, and this is TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. We're bringing together experts, thinkers, and leaders, busting myths, sharing stories, and staying connected when Canadians need it the most. We're having unexpected conversations for unprecedented times. Today, I am having a conversation with Bridget Schulte, who is an award-winning journalist for the Washington Post. And it says here that you're a harried mother of two. I don't know about that. A mother of two, and also the author of Overwhelmed: How to Work, Love, and Play When No One Has the Time. It's a fantastic book. Bridget, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I do want to say, I'm a former Washington Post reporter.
Yes,
former. I started there when my son was about 8 months old, and I left when he was 6'4". So I was there for quite some time. But I've been after I wrote the book, I've been at the director of the Better Life Lab at New America, where my job is now to try to fix all the problems that I discovered and wrote about in my book.
Yeah, I know. And it's funny because I just started following you on Twitter. I started following all the people that you follow because your Twitter is your tweets are right in line with things that I'm really interested in too. And I got to tell you, I just started reading your book a few days ago, and I told a bunch of my girlfriends about it. None of them had heard about it. And I think it's because we're all overwhelmed that we just never noticed that your book came out. But the funny thing, and actually it's not funny, the thing about your book is I see myself on every single page. And you must have other people tell you that.
Well, it's so interesting that when I first started working on this book, because it was a labor of love, really, I think the thing that I felt most acutely was I felt so alone. And I thought that I was the only one that was struggling because there really wasn't a whole lot of conversation about it in a real way. Or a lot of the conversation was all in terms of like individual fault or blaming the woman. It's like, well, if you just can't figure it all out, there's something wrong with you. So I felt sort of like stewing in shame and inadequacy. And I will say that the book was the result of, it grew out of a magazine story I wrote for the Washington Post magazine. And when that story first came out, I just really felt like, for a lot of times it's like working mothers in particular, well, all mothers are working, but if you're going out or going to the office, going to work for pay, it's there's like this kind of professional veneer that we often put on. And so I just felt like I was really stripping that away. And I felt so vulnerable in a way that I hadn't before because, newspapers especially are a very macho kind of culture. And here I was showing like, it's really tough. Like, here's a typical day in my life as a working mother. Oh, wait, there isn't one. Every day is just fraught. And there's just always so much to, I just feel like you're just doing everything all at once, all the time. And there's physical stuff you're doing and there's stuff you're trying to remember. And, I just felt totally inadequate at work and totally inadequate at, as a mother and at home. And so I wrote this piece and I kind of curled up into bed into the fetal position. And honestly, what shocked me is that I ended up getting so many emails and calls and letters. I ended up printing it out and it was literally a stack this high. And it was men and women, and it was people who had kids and who didn't. And it was really interesting that so many of them, I would say the majority of them said, you climbed into my head and you wrote about my life. And that's sort of what spurred me to continue this, to write the book and then to continue this journey, that there are so many people who feel so alone and so overwhelmed and sort of feeling that it's all their fault, that it's, if only they could meditate more, or if only they got up a half hour earlier, if only something else changed, then everything would be fine. And I think if there's anything that I've done, it's hopefully helping people see that they're part of these larger systems and structures that are really constraining a lot of the choices that we can make. And so what we really need to do is understand those forces do what we can with our own lives, but recognize that there are some larger things that need to change and work together to do that.
Well, it's interesting because I mean, I do recognize myself, as I'm sure millions of other people do, when they read these words. Um, Chapter 9, the cult of intensive motherhood. So just reading that title and then reading about, Karen Graff, who you talk about in this chapter. And I mean, this is a woman who has a master's degree, and she is like, when you're describing some of these mothers in your book, um, they sound like they are just completely disorganized and frantic and all of this. I am all of these women, by the way. And yet we're all holding it together. And I find that so many of us walk around with guilt and shame, and we don't even know why. And maybe because we were sold this idea that we can do it all.
Well, I think that's a big part of it. Not only were we sold the idea, but we're expected to do it all. And particularly in the United States, there just isn't the public policy that would help support that. It's better in Canada. But one of the things that really hasn't changed in a lot of Western, kind of the United States and Canada, I would pretty much argue anywhere, workplace cultures haven't changed. So there is this expectation that if you are going to go, at work to succeed, to advance, you need to be this ideal worker where all you do is work first, stay late, come in early. You don't have any caregiving responsibility. So in that way, so many modern work cultures have just cut women off from the start. And that's one of the things that's so interesting to me about this pandemic, because people don't recognize that remote and flexible work were always associated with women and the mommy track, because they started to spring up in the 90s when technology first allowed that. And so they were seen as these kind of off ramps. And that if you were a serious worker, you wouldn't touch it. It was like the kiss of death. Well, now everybody's remote and flexible, and granted, and doing, or not everybody, because a whole lot of people are essential workers and they can't work remotely and flexibly, and we need to make sure that we keep that in mind. But for the people who can, all of those managers who thought you could never possibly be productive at home are seeing that not only are people incredibly productive at home, but under unbelievably trying circumstances. When you're afraid to go to, just to get groceries is fraught with find your mask and find your hand sanitizer. People are dealing with childcare responsibilities. People are homeschooling. So the fact that people have been able to be productive under really unprecedented circumstances, I'm really interested to see if that just busts a hole in that kind of FaceTime and ideal worker bias. So that's one thing to remember kind of on the work side. But on the sort of the home side, the other thing that was so shocking to me, but also really helpful, is that all of the research shows, there's lots of great sociological research that shows that we have never expected women to do more and be more as mothers than we do in this modern era, and particularly for women in the middle and upper middle class. It's a very class-based thing, kind of the price of entry to be a good mother. The standards have never been higher. The time that it takes that you're expected to put in has never been higher. And we've never been expected to do as much alone. The whole idea that you don't need support, that you don't have networks. So we've got impossible standards at work, and then we've got these impossible standards at home. And that's a lot of what I ended up writing about, is this clash of these two impossible standards that fall particularly on women. And there's no way that you can win if you continue to try to meet these kinds of unrealistic expectations. And
so where did those come from? Those expectations?
So this is a great question. This is one of the things that I was looking at. Back in the 1950s, I don't know how many people I talked to who said, my dad was a doctor or, a lawyer or an engineer, and they were always home for dinner at 5. So there was a time when even professional work fit into a smaller category. And at that time, there were more kind of breadwinner homemaker families, so to speak. But what's really interesting is, larger forces started to change, kind of the globalization of the 70s, the loss of really good middle income jobs that ended up going overseas, kind of the chase for cheaper wages. So a lot of those kind of really good, working class or middle class jobs evaporated. And so you needed the second income of the second earner just to keep the family at the same position. There's been really good economic research that shows if women had not entered the workforce in the 1970s in mass, there would have been so many more families that would have fallen into poverty. So women entered the workforce for two reasons. One, there was that real need, and then the other is the women's movement opened up opportunities for women. So then women did, kind of changed as much as they could. And what needed to change was workplaces, public policy, and men. And that still hasn't happened. There've been some small changes, but so where some of those forces are is that the world has not shifted, to meet the reality that most most families live in. And then the crazy thing is what happened at work starting in the 1980s. That's when you start seeing work hours really ratchet up, particularly for the professional class. And why that is still kind of a mystery. It used to be that if you worked overtime, you were gifting your time to your company. You never got that back. And then in the 80s, it started to be something that you could be compensated for. So lawyers started working crazy hours. The tech Silicon Valley boom, like 90 hours a week and loving it. It became kind of a macho cultural marker of what a dedicated worker you were. So there were kind of economic forces, cultural forces that sort of made work this kind of behemoth that could eat you alive. And then at the same time, because of that, if you're going to compete, there was all this guilt and the kind of the mommy wars, if you will, of hopefully we're past them, but in the 90s and the early 2000s, they were very powerful. And so then there was such guilt that, trying to compete in this world of work, but then not doing it to the expense of your children. And interestingly enough, a lot of that came from time diary research that turned out to be wrong. So some of that guilt just never needed to be there in the first place.
Oh gosh, I have so many questions for you. I mean, it's because your work at home, if you will, I have 3 kids, you have 2 kids, that's full-time work, if you will. I mean, I don't consider it work. I just consider it, the balls that you keep in the air. It's just, we become very good at this. But it does help, right? To have a partner at home who is willing to share the home workload.
Well, yeah, honestly, that is, that's an understatement. But, when I'm talking about what needs to change, there's kind of 3 big things that need to change: work, public policy, and partners and men. Because the time diary research will show, the second shift is alive and well. I remember somebody said, well, the second shift was 25 years ago. Why are you writing this book? It's like, because it hasn't changed, which is kind of shocking that even as men have done more housework, even as men have increased their time in childcare, women have increased their time just that much more. So women are still doing about twice the housework and childcare that men are. And that's true even when women work full time, and even when women are the breadwinners and are making more money. So it is a massive, massive problem, I think, and it's something that the pandemic is certainly showing, because it really freezes women. You are just juggling so much. It's just impossible to try to even catch your breath. But the other thing that happens then, it enables men, whether they choose to be or they feel like they have no choice, it enables them to be that ideal worker. And so as long as you've got somebody who can live up to those ideal worker norms, they don't have to change, which means we're always, you're going to continue to freeze men in that breadwinner role. And so for men who want to be more engaged and want to share more, it makes it difficult for them. And women are stuck. So that's where all we need to be kind of pushing on all of these levers to try to get toward more opportunity for equality. Not every couple. I mean, the thing about it is there isn't one monolith. There are all sorts of different family formations. We want people to feel they have the opportunity to choose to form their families in a way that works best
Mm.
for them. And right now, it's really difficult.
Yeah. So, I mean, I want to ask you about the time diary because that's the really the launch for your book and your. But before I we get to that, let's just talk about these roles that we have. This is a pink job and a blue job. These are boy jobs and these are girl jobs and it's. I mean, that's not how I'm raising my kids. My kids are, there are no blue and pink jobs sort of thing. But when you see men who are the main caregiver for the child, looking after the kids, so they're the playing the role of mom, and the mother may be out and be the breadwinner. Those men also have it's not easy for them, is it? Because they are then judged that they're maybe not masculine because they're doing this caregiving role. Is that
Well,
what you saw?
I think that has been true, and I do think that is changing. I think that it's interesting that over the last probably the last decade, there's been a real shift in terms of how we see men and view masculinity and kind of like identity, masculine identity. And there has been so much more of a movement from men themselves about wanting to be more involved, about wanting to be more engaged. I remember, writing stories and doing some interviewing like several years ago where men were saying with this kind of real yearning, like, I want to be more than a paycheck. I want to be more than this distant breadwinner. I want to be more to my kids than my father was able to be for me. And so I think that there has been this yearning, and so you do start to see shifts and movement. And I will say, some of the most interesting things is that the more you do it, the more it becomes the norm. And so, for instance, there's really interesting research, like in like the Nordic countries, where they made men taking paid leave at the birth of their children. They made it part of their policy. They've got this use it or lose it policy that you either have to take your leave as a man or the entire family loses that portion of the leave. And so almost overnight, what ended up, it was fascinating. It changed the idea of what it meant to be a good man, a good father, and masculinity. And so all of a sudden, you were not a good father if you like made more money and earned more to provide for your family, which has been sort of since the industrial era the way we define a good father. All of a sudden, you were a good father if you didn't steal that time away from your family. And so then it changed gender norms overnight. It's not a surprise then that many of those Nordic countries have among the smallest gender wage gaps and have the greatest gender equality. They've really put a focus on it in a way that many other countries, including the United States, have not. But that exposure to care normalizes it. And I think that there's this wave starting that I don't think we can go back, which I think is exciting.
Yeah, and I mean, are we in control of it in some way too? Because of if we're raising sons, isn't it a lot of how we raise our sons?
Well, I think that's some of it, no doubt
Yeah.
about it. And like you talk about, you don't have blue jobs and pink jobs, and that's a huge part of where it starts. There's been research that shows that we do that. We give our daughters indoor tasks, do the dishes and sweep, and we give our boys outdoor tasks, mow the lawn, take out the garbage. And then we pay those tasks more because we think that they're harder so that we start the wage gap in our own homes with our own allowances. That's what research will show. And the other thing that sets up is this notion that, mowing the lawn is once a week, but dishes are every day, sweeping is every day. And so then, a lot of that division of labor, because men do work at home, but what the research will show is they'll take care of the cars that once every few months they'll mow the lawn, but the women are doing the day-to-day really time intensive tasks like cooking and laundry and cleaning, and they do the mental load of knowing what size the kids clothes are
Yes.
and planning the birthday
Yes.
parties and the kin work.
Schedules and
Exactly, all that logistics stuff. So there is stuff that we can do. I think that that's really important. When my kids were younger, I made sure that both of them babysat. Teach your boys to be caregivers too. We've tried to have them share chores. That has just been a nightmare. And I will say that my son has been so much better about doing the dishes than my daughter. So I think that's important. Try to degender chores as much as you can and recognize we're a team, we're a family, we all need to work together. And so this is your part of it. But I think it's also important to recognize that there are larger forces that make it difficult for men to be the role models that maybe they may want to be. A lot of places, like in the United States, we don't have a paid parental or maternity leave policy. And so it's all voluntary. So it's still kind of stigmatized, even for women. Women have a hard time taking it. A lot of people don't have access to it. And so if it's stigmatized for women, it's doubly so for men. And so like in my case, my husband and I, we had promised to be these equal partners. And then, it really took my book like almost 20 years later to be like, hey, wait a minute, how did we get here? I'm doing freaking everything. And you're like, what happened? It's like my whole feminist bona fides just went out the window. And we really had to kind of take time to figure out, well, when did things kind of start going off the rails? And we realized it was the moment we had our son and we brought him home from the hospital. I had maternity leave and he didn't, and so I developed that time to understand what the baby needed. We all thought it was the maternal instinct. Come to find out, there is no maternal instinct, really. Men also have, if you want to call it, a paternal instinct, that human beings are wired for nurture, regardless of your gender. That is just how we're wired as social creatures. It's just that we've given women more time to get better at it and get used to it. So if we give men time, they get good at it too.
That's so fascinating. I never looked at it as, the maternity leave and that vital bonding and the knowledge that you can only gain from experiencing it.
Yeah.
I never looked at it that way. And that is, we have paid maternity in Canada and we have paid paternity now too.
Mm-hmm.
So many men I know now are taking, 6 months paternity leave. And I just think it's so incredible that can happen.
I think to me, it's one of the most hopeful things I've seen in recent years. And I also think it's going to be a huge driving force for change in the future. When you look again, and there's good research that shows this, that men who do take that time to really bond with their children and become involved kind of in those early moments when you're setting the new family dynamic, the research shows that they stay close to their children, they stay involved, they stay engaged, and the sort of the division of labor is much fairer. And there's really cool research too that it has a huge impact on their children's sense of self-esteem and self-efficacy, their relationships that they have. There's this fantastic research that shows that when men take paid parental leave, they actually live longer than men who don't. It reduces family stress. It improves the relationships, because when you think about it, it's so unfair that women are still shouldering so much of that burden that, like you say, you don't want to call it a burden because you love your kids, but it is a lot of work. And when you're doing it alone, it can just really fuel so much resentment. And listen, these kinds of resentments, and this is not non-trivial. When you look at kind of like why relationships dissolve, majority of them are instigated by women, and a lot of it has to do with the unfair division of labor at home. So this is important stuff.
Yeah. And I think that, when we talk about this pandemic and people isolating at home, self-isolating, and you hit it right there because there is a lot of resentment. Talking to friends and we're all on these deep cleaning binges where we're, taking apart the dishwasher and cleaning out the filter and stuff. And I'm talking about how messy everybody is. And I spend all day cleaning the bathroom and no one notices. And then, have you ever felt rage after, like, from all the things that you do? Do you get that sense from people, this resentment and rage that just comes out of nowhere, and then you realize, oh, it's because I'm doing everything?
Oh, well, the whole chapter in my book where I deal with this gender division of labor, I called it my rage chapter. And the very first draft.
I have not read this one yet.
Yeah. Oh my God. The very first draft was incoherent because it was so rage filled. It was really a rant. I had to rewrite that and rewrite that and rewrite that. So yes, there is absolutely rage out there. And I have felt that for years. And you know what? It eats away at you. It eats away at your relationship. It creates so much stress. You can't really be present for your kids because you're just so pissed off all the time.
Mm.
And then you don't like to be a nag. You don't want to feel that way. And then you're
Yes.
angry because you do feel that way. And so this is where, so my husband and I mean, it got to the point where I write about it in the book. If you haven't gotten to the Thanksgiving story, you'll know you got there. So, that
Tell
was
us
just like
about it.
this horrible, horrible evening that to me, it was sort of like I don't know whether to say this is the peak or the lowest point where it's just like, I can't take this anymore. And that was really the turning point when I was just like, this either has to change or I'm leaving. I cannot do this anymore. I was so angry. I'll just set the stage. I had Martha Stewart playing in my brain as well as the ideal worker and the ideal mother. So I invited 18 people over for Thanksgiving, which was nuts. And I'm, making a ton of crazy dishes and following elaborate recipes. And there's just the kitchen looks like a bomb's gone off. And it's 2:00 in the afternoon. People are going to start coming over. I think that my husband's going to take the turkey and put it in the oven, right? Because men do meat and barbecue and stuff. And he comes over and he opens the fridge and he takes out a 6-pack of beer.
Oh.
And he says, I'm going to go help my friend with his turkey. And he walks out the door. And at that point, I'm like, oh my God, is this a cartoon? Am I in a cartoon? Where's like the candid camera? This is just ridiculous. I can't believe I can, this is not like not only the 1950s, but like the 1150s. It just felt so wrong. I was so angry. And so he came back and I said, I'm really angry. I want to have a nice time tonight. So we're not talking about this, but we are talking about this tomorrow. And then honestly, I didn't know what to do because we had fought for years, like most couples. Well, you don't do this. Well, you don't recognize how I do this. And we would just get in this, my friend Jessica DeGroot calls it the tango. You just go nowhere and nothing ever gets resolved. And it makes you both feel awful. And so being a reporter, I did the only thing I know how to do. I took a reporter's notebook with me and we went for a walk, which I would definitely encourage anybody to do because you're moving. You don't have to look at each other, especially if you're really angry. It's actually a good thing. And I just started to interview him. It's just like, how did it get this bad? Do you realize what a jerk you were yesterday? And, and I just, and we just kind of took the accusation and the defensive out. And it was just more of a curiosity. It's like, how did we get here? And then more importantly, we started thinking about what is it that we really want? What's our vision for how we want to be together and how we want our family? And how did we lose track of that? And how do we get it back? And those were such great questions because it put us both on the same side instead of opposite sides. It's like, all right, we both have this shared vision. We want to share. We want to be equal partners, better partners. We want to support each other. That's not happening now. Let's figure out why that's not happening. And then, be clear about where we are and then try these little experiments to get from here to there. So we started really small. I mean, so small. We figured out, okay, last person out of bed makes the bed. Why was I making the bed every day? I get up earlier, it's like, am I biologically wired to make the bed because I'm a woman and I have a vagina? No, I am not. So some of it was I had to recognize what I was doing too. I was falling into some of these traditional gender roles too. So we kind of had to help each other. And then it started like, okay, every morning I empty the dishwasher, you load it. And if you don't load it, I'm not going to do it for you. And then you can't be mad at the end of the day when the dishes are still in the sink because that's your job. And by the way, doing the dishes means doing the pots. The pots do not wash themselves. So we had to get really, really in the details and really clear about it. But I will say over time, it starts to, and you have to talk about it and how's it going? And you keep forgetting toilet paper and I'm not going to go grocery shopping after you. And, I would say it's a work in progress. And you know what? We're still working on it,
Yeah.
But I think what feels different is that we're working on it together and we're moving toward that vision every day. And And
Yeah.
that feels different. It's like my rage is gone. And it brings back sort of the joy in your relationship again. It's like, oh, now I remember why I married you. Oh, you're really fun, you know? So
Yeah.
it's made a world of difference in my life just to work on having a fairer division of labor at home.
Yeah, well, communication, right? It always a reasonable, when you're not raging, conversation usually works pretty well. I was laughing though, Bridget, because not because I thought any of it was funny, even though when you hear it, it is funny because I can relate to it, and I'm sure there's a lot of people listening that can relate to this and so much more that's in your book. I want to talk. Oh, we didn't talk about the time diary, and we're running out of time. But I do want to say that this whole book started because you were told that women have about 30 hours of leisure time a week, and you did not believe this. I mean, I don't believe it either. I mean, it's quite a hook right at the beginning because it's like I don't have 30 hours of leisure time a week. What are you talking about? And
Yeah,
so, I
exactly.
mean, we could talk for an hour about this 30 hours, but I mean, you're so this book, it really speaks to so many people because it we're all in this. We're all overwhelmed. We are all trying to have it all. We are all trying to be the best mom, be the best employee, be the best, mom at school that can do all the projects and go on all the field trips and all that sort of stuff. Do you think that social media and the perfection that we see sometimes on social media, I mean, how much harm is that doing to us?
Well, the social media, I wouldn't say the perfection we see on social media. I would say the manufactured perfection that
Mm,
we're intended to see on social media. It's a very, there's a
right,
lot that's
right.
great about the connections that you can make. So I don't want to discount social media at all. And there's a lot of learning and connecting that you can do that's really powerful. But at the same time, human beings were sort of designed to compare ourselves to others, and we always compare upward, which means we will always find ourselves lacking. And so it really it just triggers that natural comparison mechanism that we have, and it can really lead us to feelings of not enoughness, like I'm just not good enough. I'll never be good enough. I can never do that, which is it's a terrible way to feel, but it's a very human way to feel. And so I think what's so important to remember is, you don't have to be that mom that goes on every field trip and bakes the cupcakes at 2 a.m. and, does a stellar job on the report. You just need to be who you are. And, a lot of that means just shutting out those ideal worker notions, to the extent you can, shutting out those, kind of the cult of intensive mothering, and really come in, this is where mindfulness of, it sort of sounds cliched, but come into your own life. Come back to that sense of like, what is your vision for what you want, how you want your family to be organized? And start there and set your own rules. And one of the things that I found, as I started to kind of shift and, I would say to my kids, okay, one field trip a month or one field trip a quarter, and we have to plan in advance. And then I'm not going to feel guilty because I can't do everything. But if we plan and I put it on the calendar, I can do this and we'll have a great time. And so when I made those, kind of, kind of new boundaries, and it created a new story for that worked for me and my family. A lot of the noise, you shut out that noise because you're dealing with your own feelings of what is good enough, your own vision. You set your own compass. And I think that that's what I would encourage everyone to do. Go on social media for fun, but don't use it as something that will beat you over the head with, because there will always be somebody who is
Mm,
prettier, skinnier, richer, a better parent, bakes better cakes, makes more money, whatever metric. There will always be somebody if you're going to measure yourself that way.
mm,
So dispel with that. What is good enough for you?
good advice. What do you hope we learn from this pandemic?
Well, I think the pandemic has so clearly showed us so many cracks in what does not work. It's shown us how on earth can we have essential workers who make $11 an hour and are dying because they don't have protective equipment and they don't have access to paid sick days. That's unconscionable. How can we expect people to go back to work when no one's talking about childcare? How can we talk about, how is it that we don't even talk about, why our care workers make such little money? Why is it that we expect good workers to always be in the office and work long hours? So I think that the pandemic is showing us the cracks. It's forcing us to really rethink how we work and live, and equity and gender equity in very powerful ways. And so my hope is that we will learn lessons and emerge better and stronger, because we can't go back.
I agree. And I'm going to guess that you are still writing and working on something new. So can you give us a hint of what you have coming up?
Sure. Yeah. So really, ever since Overwhelmed came out, I've just been very passionate about trying to find, kind of what is the path forward? How do we create more gender equality? How do we create this sort of more fairer, juster, more egalitarian world? And it's so clear that so much of our work culture is what gets in the way. And so I've been working on a project, I've been reporting it and doing some writing over the past couple of years that is leading to my next book project, really looking at work in progress. How do we transform the way we work? And what will that mean in terms of gender equality and the quality of our lives?
Amazing. Okay, so Bridget's book is called Overwhelmed: Work, Love, and Play When No One Has the Time. I bought it online in paperback. It came in 2 days and it's fantastic. Told 2 girlfriends of mine about it yesterday. They both downloaded it on their Kindle or whatever, and we're all reading it now. We have our 3 mom book club reading your book, and we all see ourselves in this book for sure. You are brilliant, Bridget. You are so candid and generous with your research and your time. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about this. I could talk to you for a week solid and still not have all the information from you, because there's so much here. There really is. And this is a very helpful book for all of us. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And, at a time when I am stuck at home and I haven't been out of yoga pants in 10 weeks, it's very nice to connect with another human being, even if it's just virtually.
It's wonderful. And I should mention that you can find out more about Bridget on her website, which is bridgetschulte.com. So that's BRIGIDSCHULTE.com. And she's also on Twitter and she tweets a lot over there. Lots of good stuff. So thank you, Bridget. Stay healthy.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And you can also go to the Better Life Lab. We've got all sorts of great resources there. And I host a weekly podcast where we look at how the pandemic is disrupting work and life and gender equality. So I would love to have you join us there too.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much. And don't forget, you can join us here on TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart every Tuesday and Thursday.